Yeah, so here in front of me are keyboards with MX Brown switches. And this is something that really popped into our head because we've gone through many keyboards, and since our visit to Computex, it really has opened our eyes about the variety of keyboards and apparently the variety in MX Cherry switches, not just from reds to browns to blues, but within the category of the particular switch themselves. So brown switches on all these keyboards feel completely different, and this is something that, you know, me and the guys want to talk about and really see if this is something that other people experience too. So let's analyze right after this.
Let me ask you, what is more satisfying than a good peel? Ooh, that hits the spot, but you gotta love easy to sync ARGB components for a beautiful light show. Thermaltake's extensive support with 5-volt ARGB motherboard sync gives you lighting control of fans, memory lighting kits, all-in-one coolers, power supplies, and more by using the 5-volt header on your motherboard. You can also daisy chain a bunch of products to light from a single 5-volt header or with their own controller for individual customization. But now with ARGB sync, it's all made incredibly easy to match. Check it out below.
So in front of me, my friends, are three keyboards. The Ducky S2 Mini, which is one of my latest collections. It's my first 60% keyboard. Absolutely love that thing. We have the Cooler Master MK730 TKL version and the HyperX Allo FPS full-size boards, all with MX Brown switches. So I really want to get the guys' opinion about these switches as well. But in terms of how they feel and the actual tactility of that point in the middle, because the MX Browns have a slight tactile point. They're not exactly like blue, which has a hard tactile point. You know exactly when that actuation happens. Here, the tactile point is much softer in comparison to the blues, but it's so strange typing on one versus the other and having that tactile point be completely different. So it almost feels like it's a completely different switch. So let's begin. The Ducky. Very smooth actuation, beautiful spring. The tactile point is soft, lovely, but also not as pronounced as what I've gotten accustomed to when it comes to brown switches. The Cooler Master keyboard, this is kind of what I've known to accept as the brown switch. Very almost hard tactile point, but much softer versus the blue. And then HyperX Allo is something in the middle. It has a tactile point. You can obviously feel it once you slowly actuate the point when you press the key down, but it's definitely softer than the Cooler Master, but it's not as soft and smooth as the Ducky. And that is another characteristic that is totally different between the three keyboards, the actual smoothness of the travel of the switch. And that could be maybe related to the keycaps, but unlikely. That could be related to the spring, which is most likely what's happening, because on the Cooler Master keyboard, you almost can hear the spring bending, and it's not really pleasant. With the Ducky, super smooth, and the HyperX, it is smoother than the Cooler Master. So I need to get the guys in here and hear their opinion. Which one felt the best to you?
Honestly, this is not the first time I've tried these keyboards, but having switched between the three of them constantly, I can comfortably say that I'm leaning towards the Ducky because the switches feel a lot more smoother, lighter, and quieter, which is something that I'm appreciating a lot more these days, just because, you know, I like going that route instead of something that hits that metallic surface, gives you that metallic sound, which might be unpleasant for some of you out there.
First of all, I love the Ducky for typing because of its compactness and the fact that whenever you press a key, the actuation is clean and it's not muddy in any way. You can actually feel that actuation point. On the other hand, I wouldn't use either of these other two keyboards for typing. Not only because the spacebar is absolutely terrible, doesn't sound good, but also because there's some resistance in their actuation. It almost feels like there's something grinding inside the keyboard past that tactile point.
So between the three, which one gives you the most tactile point?
So I actually like the Ducky the most because I think it's the purest implementation of Brown, of the way I think Brown switches should feel. Whereas it, like I said before, it's a clean tactile point, and throughout the whole range, it's very, very smooth. Whereas these ones, they don't feel quite like Brown's. We actually talked to Ducky during Computex, and they were saying that in a lot of cases, they're actually binning their switches and rejecting quite a few from the Cherry factory. Whereas I'm not 100% sure on HyperX and Cooler Master, but it's something to take into account. So maybe according to Ducky, this is the way that Browns are supposed to feel. Whereas in Cooler Master and HyperX's cases, maybe they have a different thought of how Brown should feel on their implementation.
I would say the Cooler Master takes the first place in terms of giving you that tactile point, because as you're hitting the key, the tactile point is very sharp compared to the HyperX, which is a little less sharp, and then the Ducky is very soft.
So as a consumer, how would you feel getting a keyboard and then spending so much money on it, but also not really receiving the best quality switch possible? They're all kind of variable.
I might have to sort of like shoot you down a little bit on that one, because I don't know if one is of lesser quality. Especially a consumer who's not going to have most of the time a Ducky in front of them and a HyperX and a Cooler Master. What they would usually have is they would maybe try one of these at the store or maybe buy it online, and you would feel this and you would think that this is the best implementation of Brown that you could possibly get, and all the other Brown switches are the same, because you've all heard those typing tests online from keyboard testers, but there's a lot more going on here than just typing on a keyboard tester. Would I feel gypped or anything else? I don't think so, because I feel like all of these keyboards have qualities that I would want. On the other hand, because I'm more of a typist rather than a hardcore FPS gamer, I think what I would want is the Ducky, but I would be very, very happy with potentially either of these other keyboards if I didn't know the other ones existed.
And so now that you've heard the sound test, could you pick out any minute differences in the spring actuation, in the tactile point? Obviously, you can't hear the tactile point, and obviously the PBT keycaps versus ABS versus steel frame versus plastic frame all contribute to different sort of acoustic properties of how the keys bottom out and that whole sound test. But if you've ever experienced multiple keyboards with the same switch, have you encountered that type of variability that is so bizarre? And another thing I'd like to mention is the quality of the stabilizers for the longer keys, like the space bar, the backspace, the enters. All of these exhibit totally different behavior and how not only they sound, but they feel when they bottom out and how they travel down. So that is, again, another important point that ties into the whole feeling of the keyboard, like Michael said. And I'm Ducky all the way, guys.
Me too.
Man, that thing feels premium. So all of these keyboards are around $100, which is pretty good, but again, the variability is kind of shocking. Now, this is not really bring up any conclusions because we don't have much bigger sample size. It'd be great to have 5 of each keyboards and test out to see how they feel in particular category switches. But it's also important to mention that we've tested multiple speed switches, all have slightly different variations in how they feel as well. And the same thing with red switches. But I want to emphasize that depending on how many sound keyboard tests you hear on YouTube, even from our own reviews, if you have a chance to go inside the store, try them out, see how they feel exactly, and if you like them, then that's the switch for you. And you just have to face the fact that it's probably going to be different versus another keyboard that has the exact same model of the switch. It is very interesting to have such variability between the 3 keyboards. It's such a small sample size, but I mean, just treat it as a public service announcement. So yeah, I'm Dmitry.
I'm
Eber.
Mike.
And we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.
And the links are in the description below.
Yes.
Peace out.